Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something really cool. We're decoding the fascinating biological science behind eating a diverse range of whole foods. If you've ever looked down at your dinner plate and thought, is this just a delivery system for my daily percentages of vitamins? Or maybe you've treated your meals like a giant math problem you literally have to solve every day, you're in the right place. We're going to explore why eating a varied diet isn't just some generic, tired health tip. It's actually a wildly complex, interacting biochemical symphony. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture an orange. Now, imagine taking that orange completely apart. We extract the vitamin C, the carbs, the fiber, the water, and we pack all those perfectly measured, isolated pieces into a handful of sterile little capsules. My question to you is, have we just recreated the orange? Well, biology tells us, no way, not quite. See, isolated nutrients sitting in a plastic bottle might look completely identical on a spreadsheet, but once they're inside the human body, they act completely differently.
Which brings us to our first core concept, beyond the nutrition label and why those numbers just don't tell the whole story. To figure out why our imaginary capsule isn't an orange, we really have to wrap our heads around this idea of the food matrix. When you and I read a nutrition label, we're looking at a sterile black and white list, right? Protein, fat, carbs, vitamins. But reducing our food to a simple checklist, that completely ignores the vibrant, messy complexity of actual biology. Food isn't just a loose pile of chemicals. It has architecture. The food matrix is essentially the physical package. We're talking intricate plant cell walls, starch granules, complex protein networks that holds all those nutrients together. And how those nutrients are packaged fundamentally dictates how our bodies process them when we chew, digest, and absorb our meals.
Let's look at a super practical example. Think about a whole apple versus a glass of apple juice. Technically speaking, you could argue they both contain sugar, but the physiological story happening inside you is totally different. Eating a whole apple takes work. You have to chew it. Its cellular structure is mostly intact, which means the sugar is trapped inside this physical matrix of fiber and water. It takes time to eat, and it takes your body time to digest. The juice? Well, it's had its cellular structure completely pulverized, and most of that helpful fiber is gone. You can literally chug the sugar of 3 whole apples in a matter of seconds. So even if the exact grams of carbohydrates are identical between the two, the intact matrix of the whole fruit changes your body's entire metabolic response. The apple is definitely not just sugar.
So let's look a little closer at the mechanics of this in part 2. Meet the food matrix, which, spoiler alert, is about way more than just roughage.
You know, for decades, we mostly talked about fiber like it was just a broom meant to keep things moving. But let's look at what's actually going on. When the complex matrix of fiber from a whole food, let's say a black bean, enters your gut, it's essentially throwing a massive feast for the trillions of microorganisms living down there. They ferment that fiber, and in return, they produce short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, like butyrate. These compounds are amazing. They literally influence your entire intestinal environment. And this is exactly why the whole food matters so much. A bean doesn't just give you one isolated, generic fiber. It delivers a dynamic, interactive mixture of different fibers, resistant starches, and minerals, all bound up together. A highly purified fiber supplement just can't always replicate the complex feast that the original food matrix provides to your microbiome.
Now, what's really interesting here is that vitamins and minerals are only a tiny, tiny fraction of what's actually hiding inside plants. We have this massive world of phytochemicals. Plants contain thousands of bioactive compounds, some of which are quite a mouthful to pronounce, by the way, like polyphenols in berries or glucosinolates in broccoli. Scientists often have to isolate these molecules in a lab just to study them. But in the real world, a berry doesn't deliver anthocyanins alone in a sterile test tube. It delivers a rich, interacting mixture. Believe it or not, some of these compounds actually influence the stability or absorption of the others right there in your stomach. You aren't just eating one chemical, you're eating an entire interactive chemical ecosystem.
Which perfectly sets up part 3, why nutrient pairing matters, or the science of eating together. Just like those phytochemicals, the major macronutrients and micronutrients on your plate absolutely do not operate in isolation. Take this classic practical example. Plant foods like lentils contain a specific type of iron known as non-heme iron. On its own, our bodies can actually have a pretty hard time absorbing it. But if you pair that lentil with a food rich in vitamin C, like a tomato, it physically enhances your body's ability to absorb that iron. It's amazing. The composition of your meal literally changes how much nutrition you extract from it. Here's another fantastic pairing. Adding just a little bit of healthy fat to your vegetables significantly enhances your absorption of fat-soluble vitamins and certain carotenoids. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates why we shouldn't overthink every single bite we take. You do not need a complex spreadsheet to figure this out. You just need a varied, balanced diet. When you naturally mix proteins, fats, and colorful vegetables, these powerful interactions just happen automatically right there on your plate.
Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, if the physical matrix of the food is so incredibly important, shouldn't I just be eating everything completely raw? Actually, scratch that. Absolutely not. Let's think about raw versus cooked plant tissues for a second. Try eating a raw russet potato or some raw dried kidney beans. Well, please do not actually do that. It won't end well for your stomach. The thing to remember is that cooking doesn't destroy the food matrix. It transforms it. Heat softens those tough plant tissues, it changes the starch structures, and it can actually make certain nutrients far more accessible to your body. So, it's not a black and white issue of raw being good and cooked being bad. It all comes back to variety.
Let's transition into Section 4, Precision versus Food Complexity, where we figure out how to find the exact right tool for the job. We definitely need to address the elephant in the room here, supplements. Are supplements bad? No, not at all. Whole foods and supplements just have entirely different jobs in our lives. Whole foods are there to provide complexity. They give you those interacting nutrients, the fiber, the intricate structural matrix we've been talking about. Supplements, on the other hand, provide precision. They deliver highly reliable, very specific doses. Listen, a multivitamin cannot magically turn a diet of ultra-processed food into a healthy one simply because it completely lacks the biological complexity of the food matrix. But when whole foods aren't quite enough to hit your specific needs, supplements are the absolute perfect tool for targeted corrections.
Consider this scenario, for example. Vitamin B12 is not naturally present in unfortified plant foods in any reliable form. So, for someone following a vegan diet, taking a B12 supplement isn't some sort of failure of their diet. It's necessary, it's practical, and it is just fundamentally good nutrition science. If you have a diagnosed deficiency, restricted food intake, or just really high nutritional needs, using a precise supplement is incredibly smart.
Which brings us to our final section for today, building the nutrition orchestra and putting the whole ensemble together.
Throughout this whole explainer, we've kind of touched on this idea of an orchestra. Taking a single isolated supplement, well, it's kind of like asking one lone musician to perform an entire Beethoven symphony by themselves. It's useful, sure, but it's wildly incomplete. Just think about what one single whole food, like a humble lentil, brings to the stage. It doesn't just bring protein. It brings fiber, folate, magnesium, polyphenols, plus the physical matrix that dictates how it all digests. A whole food brings an entire section of the orchestra to your plate. When you eat whole grains, nuts, seeds, and colorful vegetables, you are literally gathering the entire ensemble. That immense, beautiful complexity is practically impossible to fully reproduce in a plastic bottle.
So the crucial point is that our nutritional philosophy should really be quite simple. Eat the food, fill the gaps. Adopting a food-first approach doesn't mean you have to stubbornly refuse to ever take supplements. It just means you should build your foundation with a complex architecture of diverse whole foods, and then use supplements strategically to fill in any missing notes of your nutritional melody.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. Look down at your plate tonight and ask yourself, is my next meal just a math problem of isolated calories and nutrients, or is it a vibrant, systemic ensemble of interacting ingredients? Because I promise you, once you truly understand the food matrix, you realize the nutrition is so much more fascinating than just reading a label on a box. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you enjoy the beautiful complexity of your next meal.